Hey, I'm Adam Clark Estes from Gizmodo, and this is my worst car story. So the first car I ever owned was a 1985 Volvo 740. It was the most luxurious automobile from Europe that I could buy with a $500 budget. I loved the car. It was kind of falling apart in places, but had over 200,000 miles on it, and so I was eager to hold on to it. And about a year after I got my driver's license, I was taking a trip to Washington, D.C. I grew up in Tennessee, so it was kind of a long trip, and my car had been leaking some oil. Since the oil leak fix was probably going to be more expensive than the actual car, I was just adding oil into it every time I stopped for gas, which was a little bit expensive, but not as expensive as the trip. And being a dumb teenager, I didn't pay quite enough attention to what I was doing at the time. So I remember stopping for gas somewhere in Virginia and putting the gas pump in the car, and then while the car was filling up, I went to fill up the oil, and I was kind of watching the gas pump and kind of not watching the oil going into the engine, and I spilled it all over the engine, and it immediately lit on fire. And it was a big fire, and weirdly enough, my only reaction to it was to try to blow it out like a birthday candle. So I was like blowing on the engine. I realized quickly that that wouldn't work, and so I'm looking around for, first of all, a fire extinguisher, second of all, a place to hide if the whole thing blew up. But luckily at this point in time, the oil had burned off, and no one had seen me. So I put the cap back on, shut the hood, and went to Washington, D.C. Now that would be a bad enough car story on its own. But actually, when I was on my way home, I still had the oil leak problem, and I had my mom in the car as well. And we stopped for gas, and sure enough, I did the exact same thing again. I spilled oil all over the engine, a fire popped up, and this time I was super cool about it. My mom really freaked out. She jumped out of the car, expecting it to blow up, and the fire went out, and I told my mom, like, don't worry, this has happened before, and then I had to tell the whole story to her. But we made it home. The car didn't last that much longer, though. It was a few weeks later. There was a cloud of smoke and a rolling stop in my hometown, and when the tow truck got there, the guy opened up the hood, and I was asking basically what's wrong with my car, and he's like, well, first of all, like, half your engine looks melted. How did that happen? I kept the fire story to myself, and that car never drove again. But after a while, it developed an oil leak, and it was going to be more expensive to fix the oil leak, and decided to take a road trip when I was 17 to Washington, D.C. And I will mention that I actually bought another mid-'80s Volvo 740 right after that, and did not set it on fire, and it lasted like 3 or 4 years.